Greetings, class. I've had a chance to assess your Week 3 IRRs, and so I wanted to take this opportunity to offer you some feedback and discuss some specific points related to this week's discussion questions that you were asked to respond to. First of all, it's important that you keep the big picture in mind, and this is something I've said before, but I'll mention it again, and that is to keep in mind the overall goals of our correctional system and ask yourself, what should they be? Now, that's not to say that we all have to have the same goals. However, when you take a look at the community correctional literature as a whole, and especially the rehabilitation literature, which includes, of course, your reading for this week in Cullen and Gilbert, it may become fairly evident that rehabilitation is a philosophy, is really one of the only, if not the only, forward-looking philosophies. Specifically, I'm talking about whether or not the philosophies of punishment that we've examined so far, which ones are concerned or concerned most about the future behavior of the offenders that are supervised and or incarcerated via our correctional system. Now, this week you were asked to respond to the question from a community correctional perspective, what does rehabilitation look like as a philosophy? And so when you think about a guiding philosophy is going to dictate our priorities. A guiding philosophy is going to dictate to some extent what we do and how we do it. So when you think about an offender in the community, what specifically does that mean if rehabilitation is our guiding philosophy? Well, taking a look at the Cullen and Gilbert chapter, that means that offenders in the community should not just have access to, but should be referred to, if not compelled to go to, all sorts of programming. Many of you in your IRRs talked about rehabilitation very generally, but you didn't really mention anything specific about what that specifically looks like. So when you say, it's not just enough to say, well, we should do rehabilitation. That statement, when you make a statement like that, we should do rehabilitation, you really need to expand on that at least a little bit in terms of specifically what that means. So that's first and foremost is what I would say, is that in the chapter, Cullen mentions criminogenic needs. Now, for some of you, that may have been the first time you've seen that phrase. Criminogenic simply means crime producing. And when you think about criminogenic needs or crime producing needs, think about what those might be. Now, like substance use, for example, is one that gets a lot of attention. Gang affiliation is one that gets a lot of attention. Think about the things that motivate people to be involved in crime, and in some cases, they're crimes in and of themselves. We'll discuss criminogenic needs a lot more when we get into our section and our readings on offender classification, offender assessment and classification. But again, getting back to the point, first and foremost, if rehabilitation is our philosophy driving our community corrections, first and foremost, offenders should have access to, if not be referred to, if not be compelled to engage in treatment activities, but not just any treatment activities. Not all treatment is created equal, as we'll find out as well. Some treatment programs and models are effective, some are not. In fact, some are detrimental. Some treatment programs actually, in a manner of speaking, cause crime. But more on that in a little bit. But a little more when we think about our philosophy, what does rehabilitation look like as a philosophy in community corrections? That should also then dictate how community correction officers interact with the people they supervise, the things they do to help shape behavior, the things they help to do to meet both basic as well as more advanced needs that an offender may have. For example, needing a place to live, that's very important, but I would call that a very basic need, because if you don't have a place to live, there's not a whole lot else that you can do to better yourself, because your main priority is going to be figuring out a place to live. Not having enough food to eat, that is also a need. It's a very basic need. It's a very important need, and if that need's not met, again, like a place to live, it doesn't really do you much good, or it doesn't allow you to do things to help improve yourself in other ways. So those are the sorts of things that I would ask you to think about when you formulate your response to the question from a community correctional perspective. What does rehabilitation look like as a philosophy? On the part of the offender, what does that mean? if rehabilitation is offered, that means that offenders should participate in rehabilitation. That means that we should make sure that offenders are getting it, so to speak. The second part of this question, what does rehabilitation look like as a correctional policy? Now that's a broader question. What policies should be put in place if rehabilitation is at the core of what we do? I'll say that again. What policies, what correctional policies should be put in place if rehabilitation is the driving philosophy of our system? Many of you wrote things that were absolutely fine, no problem, but they were a little bit too general. Like I mentioned a little bit ago, they just simply didn't go far enough. In addition, a couple other issues I saw with what I read was that many of you, I'm asking specifically about community corrections, and some of you just kind of ignored that and just talked about corrections in general, or some of you actually talked about prisons and completely ignoring community corrections. So you might want to fix that going into your IOW. However, speaking of prisons, I'm going to share with you a YouTube link. It's about 17 minutes long, and it's about the Attica prison uprising, except this is talking to people 40 years after the fact. So it's a film that was fairly recently made with people who are able to reflect and really do a good job of contextualizing what was going on at the time. I think it's an important piece that I want you to take a look at. In addition, I want you to view your IOW as a fresh start. Many of you have been approaching your IOWs in varying ways, and that's fine. But I want you to make sure that at the end of the week, when you submit your IOW, I want you to make sure that you've submitted something that answers the question, that is error-free. There's many of you are still losing points for grammar and spelling, coherency, and clarity. I'll make the suggestion again in case you missed it last time in my last clip. If you like, it's perfectly okay to write to do your writing in a Word document or a Word editor that's going to do a much better job of at least catching initial mistakes like grammar and spelling. A Word editor is not going to help you, or a software package isn't going to help you with coherency and clarity. For that, you really got to read your writing out loud to yourself, or better yet, I always recommend having a friend read your writing back to you. It can be an extremely revealing and very beneficial activity. So getting back to your IOWs, make sure you view your IOW as a fresh start. Make sure that you submit a document, whether it's one that you built on from your IRR, or whether it's one that you actively and more explicitly incorporate the feedback that you got from other people, or whether it's simply a new submission altogether. Make sure that your IOW is a new, fresh document that's perfectly written, that answers the question. That's really what I want you to make sure that, and moreover, that answers the question in a manner that incorporates the reading. That's extremely important. So, as always, keep in mind these things as we go forward, and keep your questions coming via email so I can answer those and get back to you. Make sure you do the reading. Remember, I'm speaking to you right now. It's about 4 o'clock on Friday, so you have a deadline at 11:59 tonight. You have to provide 2 unique and hopefully constructive. I'm really going to look at the constructiveness of your input to your classmates this week. Constructive pieces of feedback for your classmates, and then Sunday 11:59 another deadline. So nice work for the most part. Keep in mind the things I've shared with you, and have a good weekend. Take care.